three issues from myself. Your grant?
I find these things work better when you turn them on. Excuse me.
Yeah. I'll just speak very loud. The first thing is in relation to all the talk about rent pressure zones. I think the government is really driving renters mad at the moment with the drip feed of information and spin, whereby basically every renter in the country is now looking at the news that's coming out, the spin in particular this morning suggesting, don't worry, you're going to be better off somehow, and wondering how on earth does this affect me? It seems like a multi-tier system is going to be set up by the government, and renters have no idea within which tier they're going to fit. What does appear to be clear is that effectively the locked out generation are being locked even further out. Extra padlocks are being put on the gate to ensure that they're never going to be able to afford a rental property. Because anyone who isn't currently renting, it seems if they're going to get to rent, it's going to be at new market rates. They're not going to be covered by, at the moment you have properties that are within RPZs are restricted to 2% in terms of increases, but nearly all properties that new potential renters are looking for are going to be under market rates. They're going to be reset to market rates, which are incredible. You can go on to Daft now, you can look for an ordinary 3-bed apartment or house in Tala, and you're looking at €3,000 plus. We know that rents have doubled over the past 10 years while homelessness has tripled. The other thing that appears to be in what they're talking about, the future legislation, is effectively creating an incentive from landlords from what would be constructive evictions, whereby there is an incentive for the landlords to get the tenant to leave of their own accord. And one can imagine in the power dynamic that exists between the landlord and the tenant how that can be done. You're ringing your landlord looking to get the toilet fixed, looking to get the heating fixed, and none of that is going to happen. You could be bullied effectively out in order for your landlord then to be able to reset. The other thing that is striking is how a government that is made up of landlords, small landlords, is writing the laws for themselves. So they're going to write laws to continue to make it easy for so-called small landlords, including landlords with 3 properties, to be able to evict tenants through no fault of their own. So it's very worrying what is coming out, but we still don't really have full clarity. But the basic line from the government is we're going to incentivise landlords to come into the sector by allowing rents to rise faster, and that spells disaster, and that's why we are organising and mobilising for the Raise the Roof protest outside the Dáil next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Second issue, quickly to reference, is in relation to the ongoing CHI scandal. The week before last I raised the fact that I think is a very, very simple fact that surely at the very, very least the surgeons involved in doing unnecessary surgeries should be suspended, or at the very, very least should be suspended from doing these osteotomies, these surgeries on children with hip dysplasia. That has not happened, but it came to my attention last week that not only has that not happened, but incredibly, the surgeons involved in doing the unnecessary surgeries have been present, are the only people from Temple Street at the meetings which are due to decide who will get these operations into the future. So as part of the process of dealing with this crisis, it was agreed there'd be meetings to agree on indications for clinical indications into the future, to agree who's going to get these surgeries, who's not going to get these surgeries. But the people responsible for the fact that we have this crisis, the people who are doing the unnecessary surgeries, are at these meetings deciding who's going to get surgeries into the future. Is absolutely crazy situation. I don't know if the government knows about this. I don't know if management of CHI knows about this. But in my opinion, it absolutely has to be stopped. The idea that the people who are doing too many surgeries are writing the rules on who gets surgeries into the future makes no sense at all. And then just finally, obviously we saw the kidnapping of Greta Thunberg and the other activists on the Madeleine, seized from international waters, towed into Israel, and then taken to prison. Greta Thunberg is now, I think, on a flight back to Sweden. The others still in detention, quite similar to how we were treated when we were on the flotilla in 2011, an indication of how long these illegal blockades has been going on. I think people like Greta Thunberg and the thousands of people who are going to participate now in the next wave to break the siege of Gaza, which is the March to Gaza. I think 50 people or so from Ireland are participating, thousands of people across the world. All those people are showing up the governments of the West. So people are doing whatever they can to break the siege, to allow aid through and to stop the genocide, and yet the governments of the West continue to be complicit. In the case of the US, Germany, UK, Italy, fund, to arm the genocide, and in the case of the Irish government, not to do everything in their power to stop it. And this week the big test for the government is going to be in relation to the joint motion on the central bank authorisation of the sale of Israeli war bonds. Last week we know that Barry Heenan and Gillian O'Toole voted with the opposition against the government, and we would be appealing to backbench Fianna Fáilers and Fine Gaelers to do the same, to do the right thing, to not allow Ireland to participate and to authorise the sale of these bonds, which are involved in which are used to fund the genocide.
Yeah, well, I'll just continue on Gaza. I think the bravery of the people who took part in the flotilla, I commend them and utterly condemn the actions of the Israeli regime, breaking all laws. That these people had a right to be there. These are international waters. They had no right to be intercepted and detained. It's piracy, it's kidnapping, and there should be very strong objections from our government. We'll be questioning Micheál Martin and Simon Harris about this. They've said this is a genocide. They have now acknowledged that. So what are they going to do? I mean, the serious questions have to be asked, why, and they are being asked throughout Gaza. Why was it one boat? Why was there not, boats from navies all around the world? Maybe Simon Harris and Micheál Martin would agree to send the Irish Navy to actually deliver aid to break this illegal blockade, which is starving the people of Gaza. It's now been said that there's a famine, and even if aid gets in now, it may be too late for thousands of people. It's utterly, utterly sickening. And our government is complicit because it's refusing to act and to take real actions that could make a difference. We have the motion, the joint motion from many different TDs and parties on the issue of the Israeli war bonds. These bonds are directly helping to fund what the Israeli regime is doing, and they're being processed by our central bank. That's a very, very obvious thing that they could do. I also want to say about the rent pressure zones, a couple of things to note. We should note that it is now not unconstitutional to ban evictions. This is something we were told since 2016. I was in here for debates that went on till midnight in 2016. I was on the Housing Committee at the time. We were told continually we had a eviction ban bill. We were told it was unconstitutional. It's now not unconstitutional to ban evictions because the government is now going to do it. And I think it's also not unconstitutional to extend rent pressure zones all around the country. Another thing we were told was unconstitutional. I agree that it's like Aladdin's cave trying to discover what's actually going on. I think the government got a huge backlash, and they're now trying to come back with consolation prizes for the thousands of people in this country who are reliant on renting and who contact us on a daily basis facing eviction. I think the idea that you can voluntarily leave a property, look, let's get a grip here. Nobody's voluntarily leaving properties on very much because they've nowhere to go. This is a way that landlords could, rogue landlords in particular, force people out and up the rent. And I just also lastly want to say, please, to the media, stop regurgitating this thing about balance. There's no balance. All of the cards are completely stacked with landlords. There's none in the hands of renters. We know that from the people that we deal with every day. I think it would be wrong if the Dáil doesn't question about the nursing homes. I think this came out just as the Dáil had broken up. And there's a few things I think we should note. I mean, some of the things that we saw, people, sleeping in their own urine, people being, physically, forcefully moved. We've heard the families talking about that. It's not enough to hear how shocked the government is. They must go around in a permanent state of shock, because this has been known for 20 years since Lee's Cross. And since that time, more and more nursing homes have been put into the private sector. Now, I'm not condemning, I'm sure there's many good private nursing homes, But it's just an iron law that when you have care for profit, corners will be cut, and there's gross understaffing in these homes. One nurse was dealing with 20 clients, overnight. That's completely and utterly just unacceptable. Ireland and the UK are the most privatised nursing home elder care system. So why is that? The government has just washed its hands of providing care for older people, and we should object to that. We've an ageing population. We're all going to be faced with this. We've all had relatives in these situations. We'll be in these situations ourselves. There has to be a discussion about where we go on this issue. We've also been representing migrant nurses who were brought over to work in private nursing homes in Ireland on a visa system. They're not allowed to see their own families. You throw that into the mix. People who are deeply, deeply unhappy here. So there has to be a questioning of the Taoiseach about this. And just very lastly, my counselling notes bill is going to be debated at second stage on Thursday. Jim O'Callaghan says it's unconstitutional. Like they said that with so many things before, everything is practically unconstitutional that the opposition tries to bring in. And what I would say to him is this: it's in the Constitution that people have a right to health care. It's in the Constitution people have a right to privacy. So there's lots of things that are being breached already by the use of counselling notes by defence teams. So.
Paul, can I first ask you about the CHOA claim you made there? Are you aware whether those commissions you mentioned are referred to have been referred to the medical council? Because surely that's the way that they will be taken out of the system.
I'm not aware of any referral to the medical council. The Taoiseach, when I raised it with leaders' questions the week before last, basically suggested that's where it could go, and asked, for example, the family that I was in touch with, who there's an article about in the Irish Independent today, that's kind of where they should go. But unfortunately, what they were told they're in touch with lawyers and they're pursuing what they can, but they were told, for example, in relation to the attempt to pressurise this family to get their second daughter to have an unnecessary operation on her hips, it can't go to the medical council because ultimately nothing happened. So there was an attempt to pressurise. They got a second opinion, or they went back for their first opinion in the Coombe. They were told there's no need, and from the lawyer's point of view, and this is what I'm hearing the second hand from the family, talking to the lawyers say there's no basis to go to the medical council on that basis. I mean, it seems to me that on the basis of the audit was commissioned by CHI. CHI should immediately move to suspend, without prejudice, these surgeons while the audit is being verified. I understand there'll be a process of verification. It's fair enough to say we don't just rely on one surgeon, we need others to look at it to confirm that yes, these should not have happened. That should happen. And then I think also the audit is in the hands of CHI, and CHI, I think if they move to suspend without prejudice now, that will be fine. And then when you get that verified, if it proves that there's a load of unnecessary operations, then CHI could be the ones to go to the medical council, as CHI did in relation to the surgeon who was putting in the unnecessary springs. But at the moment, CHI isn't doing that, and instead these surgeons are still operating, and not only that, are involved in setting the clinical indicators for who should get the osteotomies into the future, which absolutely, I'd say, blew my mind when I heard about this.
And secondly, can I ask both deputies about the claims from the Red Network and Councillor Johansson about this, that party members tone down their socialist politics, there's performative politics and people for profit, and that there's a behind-the-scenes pact with Sinn Féin? What is your reaction to those claims today?
Look, we're disappointed that Madeleine Johansson, our councillor in Dublin Midwest, has decided to leave. I think 14 other members of People Before Profit have resigned. That's unfortunate. Madeleine's an excellent activist. I'm sure she will continue to be an excellent activist. We'll continue to work with Madeleine on a range of different issues and joint campaigns. We think it's unfortunate, and they made the wrong decision to leave. Look, there's debates on a whole range of issues in People Before Profit. It is a lively space of debate. Sometimes you're on the majority side, sometimes you're on the minority side. For me, it's a strength of People Before Profit that we have those debates. It's a broad eco-socialist party where those debates can take place. I think it's unfortunate that they've chosen to leave rather than continuing to engage in those debates as issues come up. But we are where we are in terms of that.
Can you tell us what you're discussing with
reaction
Sinn
to that?
Féin?
I'm actually not a member of People Before Profit.
Right.
No, a lot of journalists mix that up. But People Before Profit and Solidarity is a joint. We came together as part of an alliance, so I'm frequently quoted as being in People Before Profit. Look, my own views on the whole thing with coalition with Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin shouldn't get a free pass on any issues, obviously, like trans healthcare, fox hunting, and so many other issues. But I'm not a member of PBP. So.
But Paul, you've very few members of People Before Profit in the Dáil too, really, isn't it? It's
Yes,
yourself,
yeah.
Richard. So are you open to going into a coalition with Sinn Féin, which is way down the track, or would you even go into party with Sinn Féin?
I mean, so all of this, people should read our pamphlet, which got sensational coverage in the Irish Independent. I think we sold loads as a result of Hugh O'Connell's quote about it. So there's a pamphlet we wrote which precisely sets out our position on these things, People Before Profit, the case for left government. We're in favour of a left government. We think that for a left government to actually deliver the transformative change that people want in their lives in terms of housing, in terms of healthcare, in terms of climate action, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of breaking with US imperialism, we think that government needs to be willing to implement eco-socialist policies to take on the power of the capitalist class in this country. There's obviously no indication that Sinn Féin is willing to do that. We've set out a series of red lines, and we've said, and this is what our approach was in the last election, if Sinn Féin met those red lines, then we'd be willing to be part of a government. If they don't, we still will be willing to vote for a non-Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael government to come to power and to continue to vote in the interest of ordinary people. All this is very, very public on record. It's the position we had in the last general election, and we have this long pamphlet that I think is still available on PVP's website. I encourage people to go and get.
So is that an admission then of maybe your views are just perhaps a little too left for a lot of people, like Madeline's leaving because she's afraid that you're not going to be left enough, if you get me?
Yeah, I mean, our views are just to be like they're all set out in this pamphlet. And look, there's going to be debates on the left, as there are presumably in all political parties. That's natural about how you engage with all of these things. These are things that have been debated in People Before Profit extensively over the past whole series of years, certainly since I joined People Before Profit. But People Before Profit continues as a party that is striving for eco-socialist change, and that is a space for all those who want to contribute to that, whatever differences on strategic or tactical issues there may be.
What about you said it's unfortunate that council in question and the other members had left, but I mean the kind of substantive charges that have been put, the stuff that Adam outlined, would you accept any kernel of truth to that? Would you reject it at hand, somewhere in between?
We don't want to get into a public debate in the media with Madeleine, who is an excellent activist, or the other activists. It's not just Madeleine, the others are also excellent activists who unfortunately have decided to leave People Before Profit. So certainly for today, that's the main message. Is it's unfortunate they decided to leave. We'll still work with them in terms of campaigning in defence of neutrality, for action on housing, for action on climate, against the genocide in Gaza, and I just encourage people to join People Before Profit and help to build it as a broad eco-socialist party.